Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Renck. I am your host, Troy Renck, columnist for the Denver Post. Hope you're having a wonderful week for wherever you are. Thank you for joining us, Broncos country. Can't tell you how much I appreciate your support, especially as we move my fat head over to YouTube. You guys have followed suit. Danny Bailey and crew behind the scenes doing a great job with production, making it easy. An easy listen, I hope. And today will be easy and enjoyable as I'm joined from my colleague, Luca Evans from the Denver Post. We're going to summarize, go a little bit of stock up, stock down kind of stuff from Broncos recently completed mandatory, key word there, mandatory minicamp. What Luca see, what he liked, what concerns him, and where do they go next? As we got about a month here before they really ramp up for training camp. Training camp usually starts right around July 22nd, 23rd, at least they report. So it's far away, but it's really not. It's really not. So I'm going to get into all that with Luca Evans from the Post and give you guys a good primer, kind of where the Broncos sit after their off-season activities. That's all coming up after the break. Have you been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work? What are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Those of you watching on YouTube, there's Darby right there. He is fantastic. I have known Darby for the better part of a decade. Our boys played travel baseball together. I coached his son Jet in hoops. Traveling around the country, we talked a lot of Broncos. He said, Troy, you got to do a podcast. And I did. I'm so thankful he pushed me in that direction. I became his good friend. Many of his clients become his good friend. That's just how Darby is. So again, if you've been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work, give Darby's team a call. You don't have to pay him until he gets that case settled. His number, 1-833-464-4288. That number again, 1-833-464-4288, or go up to the website at hoggattlaw.com. Welcome back to the Broncos pod. I am your host, Troy Renck from the Denver Post. Again, feels like midweek, right? I've lost track of time. Trying to be a little low profile this week. This is the time that sports writers that cover pro sports around here try to get a little bit of easier work schedule. That doesn't necessarily apply to my man, Luca Evans. New to the Post, but he's put in, it feels like, a year's work since he got here. I want to be joined by Luca. Come on to the show, Luca. Luca's done amazing work. If you're not following him, you're missing out. I don't know that anyone in this surrounding region writes better in-depth feature stories than Luca, because not only his ability to report, which is fantastic, but man, he can write. And it's for his age to be as good as he is frankly a little frightening. Luca, thank you for joining the show. How you doing, my man?
Wow, it's a heck of an introduction, Troy. I'm flattered, but just trying to do my best. There's a lot of stadium business going on right now that we're trying to track down and whatnot. So, not really the off season yet, it feels like, but hopefully we'll get couple good weeks before training camp.
I'm hoping to touch on that at the end. Again, a lot of stuff continuing to percolate with that stadium that hint, they're going to be staying downtown. It's early. Things could change, but certainly if you follow the breadcrumbs early in this story, it feels like they're going to stay down there by the Burnham Yards. We'll get into that later. But, Luca, let's get right into mandatory minicamp. It was your first one out there covering the Broncos. Looks like, in my experience, you got the full Sean Payton experience. Curmudgeonly Sean Payton took a few jabs at you. That's how you know he's paying attention. When he takes a few jabs at you, it won't be long before he's ridiculing something you write, if my experience is similar to yours. But when you watch mandatory minicamp, let's start with the good news. Kind of stock up. What are some of the positive impressions you left from minicamp? And again, folks, we got to be real here. They're not in pads. These aren't the old school two-a-days that you're used to in Greeley, but you still fake games make real impressions, as I say, in training camp and in the exhibition season. You can see stuff. You can see how guys are being used, a little bit of that depth chart forming. So, Luca, what are some of the positive impressions, even if it's macro overall or specific players that jump for you?
Yeah, my beat partner, Parker Gabriel, and I were talking yesterday on Denver Post podcast, and we kind of, Parker made the point that minicamp is sort of a vibe check, without the pads. You're kind of just noticing how guys carry themselves and look and this or that and are trying to draw conclusions off of that. And I think from that perspective, I mean, we'll just get the Bo Nix conversation out of the way, to start. I think to me, who didn't see Bo in his rookie year, that first kind of, three-headed quarterback pseudo competition going into camp his rookie year, he just looks really poised, I think, confident. Like you see him, if I never watched football and I went out to Dove Valley this past week and you asked me, hey, who's, the 5 alphas on this team, I think I would point to Bo Nix and say he's one of them. He's just, you see him talking to receivers after almost every play. You see him, talking crap with the defense. He, just looks like a guy who has command of the offense. And I think when Sean Payton says, hey, he looks a lot more, he's got a better grasp on things. He doesn't have to think as much. He's more confident. Like that shows up, I think, from the eye test. So I just point, it's impossible to draw conclusions about what he's going to look like in his second year without actually seeing how defenses adjust to him. But, the maturity test, the eye test, I think he kind of passes that with flying colors, at least right now. And then beyond Bo, I'd point to, I think they've got a ton of guys in that receiver room who, the young guys, really all of them, I think, made a pretty positive impression. I don't think you can point to any of them and say this guy's stock is down. Like Devon Bailey obviously wasn't there for minicamp, but Troy, you wrote a column on him. Like he looked great in OTAs. Troy Franklin put on a few pounds. He looks fast. Marvin Mims is, seems kind of in line to start at the Z. Pat Bryant, even the rookie, made a ton of plays just throughout camp. So that's a really promising young room. And then the final, nod I'll give, and this is a guy before pads, but I just wrote a story on him, so I have to do it. But Q Robinson, at least media wise, has really just impressed a lot of us throughout camp in terms of his get off, the way he's rushing the passer. He's popping big time. Got into the backfield. It seemed like, half of plays just when I was watching. So those are some of the guys that, I'm kind of looking at and intrigued by at this moment.
Yeah, the Q Robinson story, Luca posted it's on denverpost.com on Father's Day, just a remarkable story about how Q's kind of overcoming some tragedy in his life and trying to make the best that was a very difficult, if not, a tragic situation. Robinson was a late bloomer at Alabama in ways. He was hurt. And frankly, when he was drafted, the profile was special teamer, right, Luca?
Yep.
And that's why
Yep.
when we say a guy pops, doesn't mean that, he's going to be Von Miller his rookie year. It's just when you go in with an expectation based on what the coaches and people behind the scenes are saying is, yeah, this guy could be a core special teamer. Then you watch him on the field, you're like, are you sure that's it? Are we sure?
Yeah.
Because when you look at the backup edge, you got Jonah Ellis, but after that, Tillman made a nice impression, a UFL guy, but I wouldn't say that he's got that on lockdown. Like that's,
Sure.
Q Robinson, when you go to Alabama, means you were one of the top recruits in the country from an athletic standpoint. So I think they need to keep an eye on that. The one place that you didn't touch that is amazing to me in regards to the physicality and lack thereof, Evan Ingram, folks, might be smaller than Cortland Sutton. He looks smaller than him out there. But what I was fascinated is like he's going to be in space in the middle of the field. And you didn't get to see how little their tight ends produced last year, Luca. But when you talked about Bo Nix, were there specific examples that you noticed specifically on when the give and take with the defense that, because you covered Caleb Williams, you covered a quarterback at the height of his powers at USC. Were there things what you saw with Bo where you're like, that is not a guy in his second year. That's a guy who's, as Mike McGlinchey, it's gone from being Bo's time to Bo's team.
I think it just kind of ties together with how you hear his teammates talk about him. Like he's not a guy. He's obviously, I think the maturity aspect, starting as many years as he did in college helps him. He's only 25, but it's an old soul 25. It kind of seems like, And I know Parker, I think, caught, I think there was a day when Bo was kind of jawing, back and forth after, defense made a play or something. But I would just watch him, after almost every play or every kind of individual, just throwing session, QBs to receivers, even team periods, pull Cortland Sutton aside and the two of them have a conversation. Marvin Mims, Evan Ingram, a lot of time was involved there. So just a guy who's clearly kind of organizing right now. We've heard about how he's going to, take his teammates on a throwing session or vacation or whatever, secrecy is going on there this offseason. But that, you just hear about him being a recruiter too, like all these kind of elements just sort of forming together. And I made this point to Parker yesterday, like, I think there's a chance. I think what we should be wary of with him is that there is a chance that statistically, maybe he takes a step back in some areas in year 2 and is still a better quarterback than he was in year 1, because it's very rare, you see people kind of thinking, oh, he's more composed, he's more confident, he's better control the offense. That means, like this, he'll go 29 TDs to 35 or something in his second year. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe it'll also, defenses will adjust and it'll take a while for him to adjust. And it's this cat and mouse game. And then he unlocks something in year 3. But I think it's very possible that it's not this linear progression for him, because it's very rare that it's that way for kind of young quarterbacks in this league, especially who start year 1. Peyton Manning got better year 1 to year 2, but like Baker Mayfield, for example, completely a different player, but had a great rookie year, really bad second year. And now he's 5 or 6 years in, he's a much better player than he was either of those years. So I think it's there's a lot of different range of outcomes. I just think he looks like he'll be a better player in his second year than he was his first year, I think.
Yeah, and that's fair. And when people ask me that, and sometimes, let's be honest, it's fantasy, got people playing fantasy league football. They see that he had 34 total touchdowns last year. He tied for the team high in rushing touchdowns at 4. He caught a touchdown, and he threw 29 touchdowns. And from week 4 on, he was a top 10 quarterback statistically. I mean, there's just no other way around it. But that said, if J.K. Dobbins, and I wrote this last week, if Dobbins is healthy, they have a really good chance to win the AFC West. I think they will win the AFC West. But, I mean, what does that mean? He's missed more games in his career than he's played, so it's not a guarantee he's going to be healthy. But if he's healthy, if you look at the best Sean Payton offenses, they run the ball in the red zone. His best offense, as good as Drew Brees was, and they were putting up silly points at times, so it was hard to see. But if you dig into the stats, those last few years with Kamara especially, they ran the ball in the red zone. So that's why when Luca's saying that Bo could be a better quarterback, he might have 25 touchdowns passing because J.K. Dobbins has 9 touchdowns rushing and R.J. Harvey has 4 or 5. That's where it could change. Then you said, well, the flip side is he's got Evan Ingram and maybe balances out. But, they'd have to be like the Peyton Manning offenses. I didn't cover the record-breaking offense 13, but I covered in 14. When you're scoring 35, 37 points, everybody eats. I don't know that they're going to get to that point yet, but I do believe there is a possibility that statistically it's not linear growth. It's like this, and he's still, if I get on camera here, not here, but kind of there, he's still a better quarterback. Unfortunately, when you get into this time of year, and sometimes it's overreaction, sometimes our eyes don't lie. Because, when I talk to players a lot after mandatory minicamp and text them, and one thing we won't be at, just so you know, folks, we will not be at Bo's secret passing camp with teammates. Sean Payton's like, that's his time off too.
Don't report on that.
Show up there like with TMZ, right? It's like it's in Phoenix, Alabama, at the high school where his dad coaches, just sitting in the stands. Oh, my kid's going to be a freshman here. I was just checking out the facility, and I just want to see. I could see the smoke coming out of Peyton's ears from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, while I'm in Alabama.
Oh, man.
But anyway, we doubtful that we're there for that firsthand. But you ask players after these sessions and text them, they say, hey, what are you seeing? What do you think? I'll go right to a stock down, and then I'll get your opinion on it. And again, macro to micro. But no one was more bullish on Audric Estime last year than me. I saw a Marshawn Lynch light type player. Not Marshawn Lynch, but just like some of the characteristics. And then I was like, I pushed for him to play because Javonte Williams statistically was probably the worst starting running back in the league. Great guy, great story, just wasn't getting it done. I'm out there, Luca, watching. I see a guy getting 4 team reps. Jaleel, so it goes Dobbins. It's going to go Dobbins. He wasn't getting. It's going to go Dobbins. It's going to go Harvey. It looked like Jaleel, maybe Bidet, and then Estime.
Yep.
I mean, unless I'm reading it wrong, and again, he's going to get opportunity, but it feels like he better come out and make a huge early impression if he's going to make this team. Between he, Blake Watson, and Bidet, it's going to be a race to make the team because I do see a special teams role for Jaleel McLaughlin that I don't know is there for Estime. It's going to something's going to have to be there for him. But let's talk about him first, and then we can broaden it out. But is Estime in trouble to make this team, Luca?
Yeah, I think it's possible, certainly. I think he probably knows that in some respects. I think his team probably knows that. I think, you can only take so much from kind of team reps during, during minicamp. But he just, you look at like Jaleel just looked great throughout minicamp as he did last year, just in terms of the burst, the speed. RJ Harvey looked great. Tyler Bidet even got a pass protection shout out from Sean Payton at one point. Like, I think just when you watched Estime, he just didn't, there weren't any plays that I can remember off the top of my head where he just popped or he just didn't look particularly dynamic to me. And I think when you kind of evaluate this room, I think J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey are a little bit more similar or have more overlap than people realize. They're not like, hey, let's go to, J.K. for this thing and R.J. for this thing. Like J.K. Dobbins, theoretically, if he's healthy, can be a 3-down back. And R.J. Harvey can, do more than just flash out of the backfield, obviously, and run outside the, run down the sideline. So I think they will, it's likely they play off each other, but Estime is, 228-pound power back, and J.K. Dobbins is very much, kind of leans towards a power back. So, and then they have McLaughlin and Bidet and these guys with kind of complementary skill sets in pass pro or in receiving or this or that. And you just don't really see where Estime's skill set, unless it's, goal line or this or that, you don't really see where it fits into this, puzzle piece that they have at running back right now. So I think really, Troy, like you said, his best chance is just to pop like in training camp, just to make plays and prove that, because I think it's almost a little, I wouldn't say unbelievable, but just strange that we're saying this when he had, good signs last year and he was a 5th-round pick out of Notre Dame. But you just look at where this running back room is, and I'm not smart enough. Sean Payton said, don't count, we're not counting here, but he seems like the guy who's most on the fringes just from a skill set perspective, I would say.
Well, and it's interesting to me because you hope, and I like the kid, and I know people that, at Notre Dame who loved him. I mean, I joke, he didn't need Siri to find the end zone. He had 17 touchdowns his last year. I thought at the very least he'd be a hammer at the goal line last year. He hurt himself by the fact that he fumbled early. There was something going on in practice that was keeping him from jumping into the lineup when it was clear Javonte didn't need to be in there, even though Peyton kept saying, he deserves more time, and he never got it. So maybe it was going on at practice because we don't see practice during the season. But Peyton clearly wants him to run in a physical style. And there's the story of, he had the Barry Sanders picture in his locker with kind of the X out type thing that we don't want that. We want more Jerome Bettis. And can he take that message? Because once you're inactive in a playoff game, those decisions send messages. The way he was being used in minicamp is sending a message. So hopefully he can come out early and just run some dudes over. He's not dancing. He's running guys over. And he shows this coaching staff, yes, message received. I'm the guy you thought I was. And we'll see where it goes from there. Another player, I don't know if he's in trouble, but P.J. Locke, unfortunately, has dealt with 1 million injuries. So as he's dealing with injuries, Talanoa Hufanga made such a solid impression for me. But if I look at that secondary room, PJ Locke was a huge part of last season. He struggled at the end. It's clearly why they wanted to go get Hufanga in free agency. And then you look at the nickelback situation, Jahdae Barron. You just wonder, and Jaquan McMillan's good, but as they're trying to get better, I said this on Mile High Sports yesterday with Sean Drotar. Pro Football Network, that I get their emails every day, they rank the Broncos defense #1 overall, in part because of that Barron pick. So when I look, it's not even stock down. It's like they're upgrading in ways that's nuanced. Can we expect, a Barron to play? I don't think he's going to beat out Moss. I would be surprised, but if Moss struggles, I wouldn't. Is that secondary going to shift some names? When you look at last year's playing time, it just feels like it's going to be different than the playing time that PJ Locke and Jaquan McMillan got last year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out in camp. I mean, Locke certainly is going to, he will be affected in some way by, Hufanga coming in, and obviously that pairing with Brandon Jones. But I think with Jahdae, the question is just how quickly he steps into a starting role, because right now, I mean, to me, I'm not smart enough from a football perspective to break down, to project how a guy, a rookie, corner, how a guy like that is going to look in an actual game. But he looks like he's kind of still in the processing phase a little bit. Like he's not playing 100% free fast yet, and that's fine. Like he's adjusting to the NFL game. They're playing him in a lot of different spots. Like it will take time for him to acclimate and play. He had that sort of same, in some ways, progression at Texas, where he kind of resolved himself to learning all spots on the defense, and then was just, a monster his final year. I think the question for him is just how quickly it'll take, because, right now he's not, when you watch minicamp, and not to point out who is taking reps where and this or that, but he's not the guy, at any of those spots yet. And so I think, McMillan, like you said, had a pretty solid year last year. I think that's, when you look at it in terms of Riley Moss's upside, that's probably where Jahdae would compete, in terms of to get onto the field fastest, is kind of at the nickel and that sort of thing. But maybe, for a few games, he's just kind of spelling reps, and then, right. he enters the starting lineup second half of the season or that sort of thing. So I think that's a very possible scenario. I think, to me, in addition to the backfield, that's kind of one of the more interesting facets of training camp is Jahdae taking first team reps? Is he taking second team reps? Is he playing inside? Is he playing outside? Like, there's so many different possibilities for him in that secondary.
Folks, if you're just joining into the pod, you're hitting fast forward through some stuff. This is Luca Evans you were listening to, my colleague from the Denver Post. I am, of course, Troy Renck, columnist for the Denver Post. You can find Luca's great stuff at the Denver Post, Parker Gabriel, and myself, Sean Keeler. I think we do a pretty good job of covering this team in all different ways in terms of not only the stadium issue, but what's going on the field and off it. We'll get one more question football-wise, and then we'll touch on the stadium issue before we go here. Inside linebacker, they upgrade dramatically for me with Dre Greenlaw, but he wasn't out there. And so I'm looking out there, and I'm a Justin Strnad fan. I love the fact he basically didn't play for 3 years. He's a special teams core guy who was amazing on special teams, who really took advantage of his playing time where he was unable to do that. Like his second year in the league, he wasn't ready. It circles back around to him, and he is ready. Just a great story, great guy who just, put his head down and self-aware. What do I need to get better? And he got a lot better at tackling, frankly, and his ability to blitz we didn't know about until we saw last year. But I look out there, and it's Justin Strnad and Drew Sanders.
Yep.
Sanders, to me, is a weapon if you almost blitz him even from the inside. He's an outside guy playing in, but he's a little bit of a tweener outside. His athleticism's off the charts, but I like him better at outside, but maybe there is a quasi role with him where he can make plays at inside that almost function like an outside backer. But I want to go right to the point. Is Drake Greenlaw going to be healthy? Are we going to see a starting, can you put your medical cap on there? And Are we going to see Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw? Is that still your prediction, especially in your sources with Greenlaw? Is he going to be good to go? Maybe even if it's later in camp for this regular season?
Yeah, I'm not gonna fully put on the doctor cap because I can't.
You didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night?
No, unfortunately. But I do from all indications, and we saw Dre Greenlaw out there. He's working on rehabbing on practice field and doing his own individual thing, and staying around the team. I think the fact that he's around, just point blank period, through OTAs and through minicamp is a good sign. And from everything that I've heard, from everything we've heard, from everything Sean Payton has said, he should be back for training camp. It's just this quad. There's no lingering, concerns with him last year, the Achilles, that sort of thing. That is, there's no kind of, I guess, lengthy concern around that. It's just this quad. I think, in all expectations, he should be fine for camp. And Alex Singleton too, we saw him out there. We saw him, obviously wasn't taking a ton of reps, which makes sense, but he's sprinting, he's running around. He himself says he feels great. So I think there's a reasonable expectation that both of those guys are going to suit up, that you're going to have that duo for week one. Now, I think behind them, like you said, the Drew Sanders experiment is going to be really fascinating. Sean Payton talked about his ability to blitz from kind of the interior spot. And so, maybe he's a guy who's, he's playing Will and in this kind of like hybrid role where he's blitzing a lot. Maybe they're not using him in coverage all the time. It's going to be, really interesting when he gets reps. And then to me, a guy that, is also there that was just making a lot of plays in training camp too is Lavelle Bailey, who, we saw him, he had a pick one point in practice, just kind of seemed to always be around. He impressed me just in coverage. And so that the way that there's going to be opportunity for those guys further down on the depth chart, regardless of, I don't think Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton are each going to play 17 games, regardless of anything. And so the way that, Drew Sanders, Lavelle Bailey, Justin Strnad, maybe even, a couple of these undrafted rookies like JB Brown looked pretty good in camp. So the way that they step up throughout training camp will be interesting too.
Yeah, they're in a good spot defensively. When we're talking about, like a kind of a mini role for Sanders, that's a good place to be, because if you'd have told me after his rookie mini camp, I would have thought he was starting this year. Like, it would have been a fake complete, and he's just not ready. Maybe they can find, moving positions never helps a young player, no matter what anybody tells you. I've never seen a young player move positions his first couple of years and it help his career. But maybe now he's settled, an off season to focus on it. He can become this very singular weapon, like almost like a pinch hitter you use in baseball to fire that bullet off the bench. Maybe he can become that guy. We will finish up again, joined by Luca Evans, my colleague from the Denver Post, with the stadium issue. Reporting last week from you, Parker, several news reporters, and I don't want to mention all names because I'll forget someone, but I know obviously you, Luca, and Parker are involved in this reporting. The ownership group has purchased upwards of like 10 plots around Burnham Yards. They've been in discussions now, the latest with people from the Water Commission on when that property, that land, that building, when it would be available. And then there's this concrete yards between it. It feels like if they get those, that's where they'll go. But just kind of give our listeners an idea, Luke, of what the reporting, where it's leading you. There is no conclusion. We want to make that clear. The Broncos aren't confirming that that's their primary location. And with the money the Waltons have, whereas other ownership groups can't, they could literally send out fake signals and buy up half of Denver and then move somewhere else. Most ownership groups can't do that. But as you follow the breadcrumbs of this in the reporting, what are some of the indications? What should we interpret and infer from the kind of the news of last week regarding the potential site of a new stadium?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll preface by Parker has been all over this, and much more certainly than I have. But we were talking, yesterday on talking through some of the things here, and he made the point that, maybe this is, it could be a smoke signal. It could be, an opportunity to use for leverage with, or vice versa with a site in Lone Tree or Aurora or this or that. But at the end of the day, any kind of real estate expert that we've talked to or whomever will point you to, it makes sense, the most sense for them to stay in Denver, in downtown Denver, especially, Burnham Yard right there by a rail line. Like there's the light rail. There's just a lot more sense to them being there in Burnham Yard. If they're going to stay in Denver, is one of the only feasible plots that you can point to and say, this is where you could build a stadium. This is where it's big enough. And
an entertainment district.
Yeah, exactly. And that
entertainment district.
Yeah. And that's kind of more at the lines of what I'm looking down is, hey, all of a sudden you might have a ton of districts right in the same, few mile radius in Denver. What's that going to do for the city? But if they are looking there, they all the breadcrumbs, as you pointed, are leading to, they're talking with Denver Water. They need that, 35 mile, whatever it is, acreage. If they're going to build an, entertainment district, they can't do it on the 52 in Burnham Yard and buying up, potentially plots of land around the site. It all seems to indicate or point towards that they are at least targeting or focusing there. Not to say they're not focusing on other areas, but they are certainly focusing on Burnham Yard as, a potential site. So, where does that, we don't quite know the timeline yet. It seems like things will need to progress in the next year. But realistically, this could move slowly or it could move quick. So I just think everything that we know with, the communication that they've had buying pieces of land and properties around, obviously having those talks with Denver Water, I think it makes sense that they are certainly focused on that and evaluating it as a possible or even likely future site.
Yeah, and people understand the lease doesn't run out with the Mile High Sports Commission until like 2030. Yeah. So everyone's like, you got time, but the problem is they don't have 5 years because a project of this magnitude takes multi-year, 3-4 years to complete. Yeah. If you look at the timeline of what it took to do SoFi, and SoFi got delayed because of water issues, and they had to build basically 6 stories underground because of reasons for the earthquake and what they deal with out there. But these projects take a long time. And that's just the stadium. I mean, we're talking about an entertainment district with it. So, yes, it's 2030, and people, I get in the email, why do you care? It's so far off. Well, again, this isn't like someone building a house. This takes,
you got to move quick.
You got to move quick to a point where you're prepared to pounce. And, again, I'm on record saying there's a reason they're called the Denver Broncos. I think it's I would like to see them stay there. I've covered games there since 1993 in the city. I think when the team's right and they're good, like there's a real issue, a real advantage to playing in the city where most of your fans are located. If you go to Lone Tree, you go to Aurora, there's advantages to that, and I understand that, but they're the Denver Broncos for a reason, in my opinion. So we'll see where it takes you. Guys, again, if you're not reading Luca Evans, I don't know what you're doing if you're part of Broncos country. You need to read Luca. You need to read Parker. We try to keep you as informed through intelligent commentary, insightful commentary, unbelievable features you can't get anywhere else, and news of the day. I just think we hit for the cycle at times. We miss like anyone, but I don't know where you could get better coverage. I'm fortunate to be on this team of reporters that includes Luca Evans. Luca, thank you so much for the time. I'm sure we'll cross paths soon, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Troy. Enjoy this sort of break, I suppose. And we'll get there for training camp soon enough.
Yep. Get the sun screen ready. We'll have the water. I might even wear a cap. I doubt it because I'm not a cap guy, but I could. Look, I got a short haircut now. I might have to get my fat head from getting sunburned. Folks, again, this podcast would not be made possible without folks like Luca joining it. Darby Hoggatt of Hoggatt Injury Law, Danny Bailey behind the screen with Mile High Sports, and Nate Lundy. They are the best. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.